subject number 6. This is a first read for adoption of Policy IKA, Grading Assessment Systems. Presenting is Chief Academic Officer Dr. Stacy Dattery, and this is not an action item, this is an information item, so we're still in policy, but first read.
That is correct. As it is a new policy, any new policy comes before the board over the course of 2 meetings. The first is an information item, and to get a deeper understanding, and then the next meeting we will ask you to take action on this. In addition to this policy, so this is Policy IKA on grading and assessment systems. Colorado school districts are required by law to adopt such a policy on this subject, and it does contain very specific direction as to what districts and Board of Education is to have contained in a policy. This policy touches on a comprehensive program of assessments to be developed by a district, and that's that first section, as you can see, and there are different aspects that student assessment program must contain, and that is outlined in those 4 bullets. It also contains language around the very thing we were talking about earlier, around assessment being an integral part of the teaching and learning process, and that must be a primary purpose of such assessment practices in order for teachers to make those instructional decisions on a continuous basis for students. And finally, this policy not only addresses the assessment system, but also the grading system, as those 2 things really go hand in hand. And so there is a short section on the administration and professional staff jointly devising a grading system for evaluating and recording student progress and measuring student performance. We currently do those things. This policy and this language is something that we currently already have in place and continue to refine yearly. It's really a part of the entire vertical teaming process as teachers get together and think about those grading practices from a district perspective, and then they have those ongoing conversations at the school level as they put into practice the common systems around that. It is important to note it is the number 7, but that this policy, IKA, as a new policy, actually repeals 2 policies that are in number 7 on your board agenda of IKAB and then policy ILBB. So that's the purpose. This new policy is in place to then repeal the 2 current policies that are currently on in the board policy manual.
Thank you very much. I don't think you're going in. Do we have any questions? Mr. Hall?
Dr. Dattery, I noticed this must have come to us from CASB.
Yes, it does.
And I notice in their little disclaimer that they recommend that we run it by our own attorneys.
Yes.
For compliance. Have we done that?
Yes.
Yes, we have?
Yes.
Okay. Jim?
Jim. Dr. Rich?
Okay, so I would like to have a little bit of conversation about this and maybe just take a look at some of the pieces that we might want to add to this or take another slant at. And I don't know if you want me just to start from the top.
Give us your thoughts.
Okay. Just at a beginning point, that very first, and I know that this was written by CASB, and they feed us policies that then we can work with. But the first line of, the board believes that students will respond more positively to the opportunity for success than to the threat of failure, to me was an odd opening line for a new policy on grading, assessments, and evaluations. And just a suggestion that I would have is moving it away from that idea of carrots and sticks of assessments, that assessments are tools for understanding the depth of learning. They are helpful to teachers as well as students to understand what students actually know or are able to do. Something more broad that connects it to learning rather than the threat and failure piece. Under the assessment system where they list those 1, 2, 3, 4 items. I agree with number 1, thinking critically, applying what they know. Number 3, reliable and valid. Number 4, timely and useful. But I go back up to number 2 where it says include early warning features that allow problems to be diagnosed promptly to let students, teachers, and parents and guardians know that extra effort is necessary. I would suggest that we might want to consider that early warning is not just, is the student not putting out effort? That could be one of the solutions, but that early warning can be helpful to teachers in their planning for instruction as well. So
you'd like that wording to be changed? Because I believe that, I read it as that's the intent, and so I think that's what you're wanting as well, is that it would read a little bit more about what that effort
a little bit more broadly
really
about what
means.
how assessments can provide us early warnings and
Got
how
it.
helpful they can be. That it's not just necessarily, and it may well be student effort, but it's a broader, it's broader. Early warning can be helpful in a broader sense.
And number 2 is really in alignment with the READ Act requirements, and so
they want that language to
not
reflect.
that we have to have the word effort, and so I think, but that's what the intent of number 2 is in
Okay.
accordance with that, but we can certainly adjust
Maybe
the
broaden
language.
that just
I
a little
appreciate
bit.
that. Absolutely.
So as this comes back to us, then everyone would have a chance to take a look at it. The, on the second page, the second paragraph down,
Yes.
talking about classroom assessments be aligned and their integral, primary purpose, instructional decisions. I was wondering if we wanted to include anything about timely feedback to students.
Excellent.
And then, yeah, I know you're all saying, wow, she really dug into this one, but it just struck me.
When you mean timely, what are we asking the educator to
provide
respond
in a,
quickly once they've given that
right,
assessment?
in a timely manner, yeah.
And to me, my expectation on that is that we expect them to be professionals. And to do that, I don't think that we need to necessarily have a policy on that. I think that that should be the expectation as a professional.
Of good assessment practice.
I mean, and if
which would
they
be
do a
fine.
good job at it, then I don't think it should be in policy. But
I-
you're correct that
yeah.
we need to have that, but I think that that's their responsibility as a professional.
Okay,
to do
and
that.
I could live with that, if
Okay.
that's not in there. But it does get to another piece of this, and it's under the grading system, and it says specifically, peer grading of student assessments and classroom assessments is permissible. The intent of this practice is to teach material again in a new context and to show students how to assist and respect fellow students. And that was a piece that I thought, is that really policy, or is that part of that professional assessment, the way professionals would do good assessment? And I was wondering if we really needed to have that as part of a policy statement. Or does that come out of some law that we are required to address that?
Yeah, go ahead.
I
When-
agree. I think that goes professionally. I think that Mr. Hall teaches differently than you do, and he may not use that peer component,
Yeah,
and you may use it incredibly well. And what fits for that educator is what's important. And if we have appropriate SB 191 conversations, maybe the person who's doing the evaluation says, have you ever thought of trying this? But I would agree with
didn't-
you that that's
it
not
doesn't seem
something,
policy-like.
that's not policy-wise either.
However, Wayne?
Just as a point of information, we don't accept every policy or every wording change
Right.
that he sends us.
No.
So the board certainly can place its own preferences into policy, and as long as they don't contradict the state law.
State law.
Right.
So
which
I'm
that does.
hearing
So I-
that even though this is permissible, I don't know that it's connected to a legal requirement.
It is not connected to a legal requirement. In fact, that is part of it being under a grading system, and it coming as wording from CASB, is that over time, that is certainly a practice that has come under question. And we've had that happen periodically in the time that I've been here. It has not become a huge issue, but it does come under question, and I think that it is, if it is permissible and you want it to be something that is in policy, there's some language around that, but it is not a part of any law or anything that we must do. And so it is also easily, it can be stricken from this policy if it feels more like a practice-driven point of work in the classroom and at the building discretion rather than in a policy at a district-wide.
And I would also be very open to any comments that you have to say this would be helpful when we work with teachers, but that was a piece that just didn't seem like policy. It felt more like practice. I had one other place under the grading system. It says records and reports of individual students shall be kept in a form meaningful to parents/guardians as well as teachers. And I might say that this would be policy level, that we should really include students in there as well, so that as students get their grades from this grading system with that header on it, that they too understand what that grade means.
Okay,
Just some thoughts I wanted to put in at
Excellent.
first read.
that's what
Take
this
a
is
look
for.
at
Mr. Hall.
Forgive me if I misunderstood this earlier, but on number 2 above, I think in the statement where it says that know that extra effort is necessary, I think that's speaking to all the people listed in that line, not just students. And somewhere along the line, extra effort is necessary. So
Yeah, I think my request was to expand that, to keep extra effort. That would be fine, but that early warning can be
Items that may not be related to effort.
Right. And so to understand, if the early warning piece is in there, that it might be extra effort, but it might be other things, and to just broaden that statement, but not necessarily to exclude, to exclude the effort, because that's a piece of the pie.
true, I tend to believe that their verbiage and use of extra effort isn't necessarily meaning extra work of the hands into the process. It's more something else is required. The early warning is telling us that we've got a problem here and we've got to do something more than what we're doing or something different. So I don't know if it changes those 2 words, but it is kind of all inclusive. Okay, I'm glad we clarified that.
Mr. Eads, were you still?
Yep. Just to be clear, so enhance the extra effort, other support or other things that might be needed, not just effort on the student's behalf. And we'll try some new wording there.
Right, yeah.
And then were we being asked to delete the sentence under grading systems that begins with peer grading, just to take that out and not make it a part of our policy? I just wanted to be clear on that. So. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Hafley?
In the last paragraph, it talks about the assessment systems and how it's subjective.
Yeah, forgot
Again,
that one.
I don't think that's policy. I think that's more professional development and the idea of creating appropriate rubrics that evaluate what's being tested based on standards. And I think it should be struck.
That whole last paragraph
Yeah,
is.
it's, sorry.
Well, no, yeah.
No, we were
I
very much the same.
I guess I get the
You-
feeling that this, we may
okay.
want to include some of these revisions maybe as homework prior to our next work session, just so that everyone can have a chance to see the new language before
We'll
we get there.
send
'Cause
it
I think
out
there's some,
early so you can see it. So.
yeah, I think that there's some ideological differences maybe with this recommendation from CASB, so we'll take a crack at it.
Okay.
That's okay.
That sounds good.
Any further dialogue?
No.
Julia?
There we go.
All right, I think you have one more. Thank you for presenting on that topic.
Thank you.
Our next subject is first review for repeal of policy IKAB, report cards, progress reports, and repeal of policy ILBB, state program assessments. And Dr. Stacy Daddery, you're continuing to present.
So those are the 2 that we repeal as a result of going forward with this one, and that is that the recommendation of
Is to
CASB
repeal.
is to repeal those and and move it into one policy.
Okay.
So if that is good.
So I think we generally covered that, but
Yes.
is there further discussion?
Good.
All right, we'll move on. Thank
All
you
right,
very much.
thank you.
On into our business and finance section. Item number 1 is an intergovernmental agreement with the City of Greeley for use of communications tower. Interim Superintendent Wayne Eads will present, and this is an action item.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, members of the board. I'd like to invite Will Jones, the transit manager for the City of Greeley, up with me, and I'd also like to just point out that others who were directly involved in getting this going, Brad Johnson, who was ill and not able to be with us tonight, really provided operational detail on how a new radio system might work. Joe Ronneberg, our technology director, provided technical advice in terms of what was feasible, what would work, and what was needed. And Mandy Hydock, our finance director, assisted with procurement as we worked through the whole process and helped us with the financial piece. And if we have questions about this agreement, any of those folks might come up and help us. I would want to say about Will that he's been a really tireless partner in working with the school district. When he heard the district was struggling with its radio system and trying to build another one, he recognized an opportunity and offered to partner with us to help work out something that would benefit both entities. He's the operational brains behind the Crown Jewel busing program and keeping it functional. Would you like to give a little overview?
Yeah, it was funny. I was talking to, as it relates to Crown Jewels, not to sidestep, but ran some numbers for year to date for this school year, and ridership over last year's numbers is up 313%. Total of 47, I think it was 47 or 45,000 additional rides over last year. So,
wow.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's huge. This agreement basically is a sharing agreement that allows us to support the cost of the infrastructure to install on repeaters on the radio towers that will enable us to reach all of our schools with digital radio technology. And this, the city is basically going to allow us to use some frequencies. It's very flexible, very modern technology where we can have a number of different frequencies that we assign. We could have an all high school frequency, or all athletic directors or coaches frequency. So there will be a lot of uses that we'll discover as we move forward with this. And I'll just mention the partner piece, which is the actual purchase of radios that come up next. Our schools have been desperate for several years to have a radio system that works. They keep trying to buy the smaller handheld models that don't work all the way across West High School because of all the concrete and steel. This should make our radio system effective citywide. And I want to mention our security director, safety and security director, Mr. Gates, who is also advising us on what we really need in order to help our schools and their staffs be able to communicate with each other quickly in terms of an emergency. So this agreement commits us to about $90,000 worth of infrastructure support. That will basically be our share. And I will say that Will and his team worked hard to keep our costs as low as they could reasonably be and still make us partners by not making us share every piece of the infrastructure, some of which would really benefit just the City of Greeley. So they really looked hard to make sure that we paid a reasonable amount and that we would benefit from it directly. So I think it's a very strong agreement, and I hope you'll pass it. So anything you'd like to add, Will?
I think there's some definite benefits. One of those things is a direct connection to the 911 emergency connection or dispatch center as well. So.
Thank you for presenting. This is an action item.
I move that the Board of Education of Warren County School District 6 approve the intergovernmental agreement with the City of Greeley for shared use of Greeley's leased space for the communications tower as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Ms. Solis?
I just want to thank you for working so hard together for the safety of our kiddos, and this is a huge piece in that. And I know that we have lots of parents that read stuff in the newspaper, see the stuff on the news, and are always concerned, and this is another step forward in making sure that kiddos are safe. So thank you.
Any additional questions or comments? Thank you for presenting. Ms. Barea, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Haefele,
Aye.
Mr. Hall,
Aye.
Mr. Lydiak,
Aye.
Dr. Richard,
Aye.
Mr. Richardson,
Aye.
Mrs. Solis,
Aye.
and the motion carries 6-0.
You guys are still up here presenting for us, right?
Well, this is a
Will, you can
district
take a seat, I
purchase.
guess. This is
Will
a
can stay
purchase,
here,
so-
unless he wants to buy the radios for us. He's probably done more than his share.
Not volunteering, I see. Okay.
All right.
Well, Mr. Eads, would you present for the Motorola Digital Radios purchase? This is an action item, so at the conclusion of your description, we'd...
Yes, this is a purchase of 244 radios that completely replaces all the handheld radios in the district. We will be giving 14 radios to each high school, 10 to each middle school, and 6 to each elementary school. The balance will go into the hands of technicians and security folks. So this will literally replace the radios across the district, and they'll be able to talk to each other with a nice strong signal. We looked at different ways to handle this, but it's pretty hard to beat the instant communication of radio. If you're at a high school and you need to notify key staff members immediately, this is the way to go. So this is the purchase, 244 radios, $170,000. It is lowest price and best design, best qualifications. So.
This is a motion, or an action item. Do we have a motion?
I move that the Board of Education of Weld County School District approve the purchasing authorization with wireless advanced communications for Motorola Digital Radios for multiple district sites not to exceed $170,556 as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion on the topic? I have one question. So this is just for the handhelds, and then the infrastructure cost is in addition, or is that?
The infrastructure cost is in addition. That's covered in the IGA, and this is just for the radios, this purchase order.
Okay.
And our buses use a different system, so they're not involved. So,
Thank you. Seeing no other comments, Ms. Barea, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Haefele,
Aye.
Mr. Hall,
Aye.
Mr. Lydiak,
Aye.
Dr. Richard,
Aye.
Mr. Richardson,
Aye.
Mrs. Solis,
Aye.
and the motion carries 6-0.
Mr. Eads, thank you very much. Item 3 under Business and Finance is all copy products, a district-wide copier lease agreement. Presenting, we have a couple of new faces, or one new face, Chief Financial Officer Megan Sponsler and Director of Finance Mandy Hydock. Mandy, thanks for coming. It's the first time this evening. Congratulations.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Good evening. I'm going to actually turn this over to Mandy because she is the one that really has spearheaded this project. If you looked at your materials, you saw that overall the district is on track to copy almost 30 million different copies this year. So copy machines are a big deal, and I think that it's one of Mandy's most favorite projects. So, Mandy?
Good evening, Mr. Richardson, Mr. Eads, and members of the board. I bring forth to you a request for approval for a district-wide copier lease agreement and maintenance lease agreement with all copy products. The current 5-year maintenance and lease agreements with Capital Business Systems expires on June 30th, 2015. These agreements were entered into 5 years ago and netted an overall savings of approximately $650,000. At that time, there were multiple machines in multiple departments and schools throughout the district. The district-wide lease allowed for an opportunity to generate cost savings through a bulk purchase lease agreement. In February, the Finance Department, with the support of the Copier Evaluation Committee, issued a request for proposal for a new 5-year lease agreement. 10 vendors responded to the request, and the committee scored the responses through an evaluation matrix and determined the top 3 vendors. Representatives from these 3 vendors were brought in for interviews. Areas of focus through the evaluation and interview period included cost per copier maintenance cost, service response times, staff ability to meet the needs of an organization our size, credibility in the market, and the ability to develop relationships with our end users. Additionally, information was sought from the schools and departments seeking their input and recommendation requests for the copy machines. This information was considered and included in this copier lease brought forth to you this evening. Once the interviews were finalized, the committee determined all copy products would be the best solution for the district. The lease expense will be slightly lower per month, yet an additional 11 machines will be added to the copier fleet. The overall cost per copy will net an annual increase of approximately $10,000 based on current copy usage. A full implementation and training schedule has been developed with all copy products, with installation to begin at the end of June. At this time, I would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Do we have a motion?
I move that the Board of Education of Weld County School District 6 approve the agreement with all copy products for a district-wide copier lease not to exceed $228,951.32 as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Thank you for presenting and for providing us information. Do we have any discussion on the topic? Seeing none, Ms. Barea, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Haefele?
Aye.
Mr. Hall?
Aye.
Mr. Lydiak?
Aye.
Dr. Richard?
Aye.
Mr. Richardson?
Aye.
Mrs. Solis?
Aye.
And the motion carries 6-0.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I mean, we have used a few copiers at my office, and it is the worst experience when they are down. I will say that about copiers. So the service component is pretty big there. That concludes our meeting this evening, and we are now adjourned. Thank you.